Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to discuss the Cityscape D&D 3.5 book. Now, the first thing I want to show you about this book that I happen to really like is maps. This is just one example. There are a number of them in the book. And I love maps. I in particular like maps which are easily plugged and played, if you will. This book presents a number of different city types in here, from very small thorps to much larger cities. That particular one I just showed you was a port city. And what I like about the way they did this is they give you the image, they give you a rough outline of the city, its defenses, points of interest. And any GM worth the name could very easily take this, file off the serial numbers, if you will, change a few names here and there, change some of the locations, make up a list of important NPCs, and drop that city into any campaign anywhere they want. Whether you need a quick city or you want to use one as the center of an entire campaign. I think that with the help of this book, you could come up with something in an afternoon or maybe a couple of afternoons that would do you well in any campaign. Now, I freely admit that I don't put a huge amount of details to the cities that I run. I have like 3 or 4 important places, and everything else is kind of just filled in as I need them. My cities very much have a generic kind of fantasy feel to them. Of course, the specific types of different cities, like a dwarven city or an elven city, they have some variety. But if you're just looking at a generic fantasy city that's going to be, multicultural, I don't put a great deal of detail. I like to have a number of important NPCs, and I pretty much let the players figure these things out on their own, as far as what they're filling the details in. Sometimes if you don't tell people what they're supposed to be finding, they bring up the most interesting ideas. Now, I'm going to do a quick rundown what's in this book. We start out with the concept of alignment. Does your city have a particular alignment to it? And it gives the cities by type, and that was the one I just showed you, the port city. Then it gives specific types of cities: dwarf, elf, gnome, halfling, orc, and goblinoid, and planar. All of these are some good, decent examples. Of course, I think you're always going to be able to come up with more of your on your own. These are, however, good adventure seed ideas and good ideas for the general layout of what you're looking for. Unusual locations, coastals, cliff faces, divided cities, things like different sides of a river. Island cities, sky city, which are always very cool. I always like floating cities. And underground cities, which is, could be anything, but, dwarves are definitely the most iconic underground city. Then you have features and hazards of the city, things like lighting, roads and streets, sewers, things like that. You have districts in the cities, like a city civic district, elf neighborhoods, and you're really looking about, talking about ethnic ghettos in that regard. And I think most cities are going to have some kind of ethnic ghetto structure in them if they're over a certain size. Guild halls, a marketplace, of course, temple districts, inns and taverns, of course, a prison system, which is always useful, particularly if your player characters break the law. The Undercity, theaters, tanneries, things like that. And tanneries are always going to be in the outskirts, usually outside the walls, because tanneries are stinky places. They do, after all, use fecal matter to tan those hides. Not pretty. Then you have a bunch of information on urban adventuring. A lot of lists of urban feats, spells, spell descriptions, some new warlock invocations. Then we have a section on city governments, the political and power structures, which I think is quite good. Houses, kind of the concept of gaining patronage from a powerful house. So it could be a mercantile house or just a noble or royal house, things like that. Different organizations that can be in a city, and why you might want to be a member, how you become a member, how you get your buns kicked out, and how you get chased around by the different organizations. And you have a list of urban events, planned and unplanned things. Some NPC encounter, which is always very helpful for every GM out there. a small section of urban city-based monsters, and then running the city. A whole chapter about how you go about running the mechanics of your city so it makes a certain level of a sense, at least enough for a fantasy setting. And then the last is you have something on city law. Now there are a couple of prestige classes in here. One of which is about this infiltrator, this backdoor Machiavellian spy kind of thing, which is very appropriate. But they've got a PRC in here, which is called the Crimson Scourge. And it's essentially a bounty hunter. Now, one of the requirements is any non-good. And I do not grasp this.
Now they do have, for example, a class ability called Painful Strike, which adds a +1 die 6 non-lethal damage. Why you have to call it painful, I don't know. Non-lethal damage is alignment neutral, and it doesn't necessarily hurt any more than when you hit somebody with your bare fist and you're not doing extra damage. So I don't know why it's called Painful Strike. I think that kind of gives it a negative idea. And why does a bounty hunter have to be a negative job? Why can't paladins be bounty hunters? That makes perfect sense. They're all about holding up the law. They should be pulling criminals in alive so that they can face justice. And I can see an entire monastery of monks, all alignments, called like the Crimson Sash, whose job is that the government gives them warrants. They go out and they find the criminals, and they get a cut of the reward, and they use that not only to run their monastery, but to help the public. Orphanages, food, things like that. Maybe education programs. So, I mean, I don't think bounty hunters have to have a negative reputation. I don't quite grasp why they do. But if you're going to run an urban environment of any kind, even if you just want to drop a small city into your campaign, I think you really need to look into Cityscape. It's quite good, and I think it's just as useful as the Dungeonscape book was.